right, I think I am streaming right now. I think it's working. So, hello everybody. This is Joe Magalette with History, Prophecy, Current Events. Let me go ahead and play the intro video and we'll get started. Okay, I had a minor technical difficulty there for a second, and so got it fixed pretty quick. Um, I am not the best at this tech stuff, so just really interesting. I hope that you like the program tonight. What I've prepared, I want to talk about the temple that may be going up in Jerusalem pretty soon. I also want to talk about nuclear war and the current state of what's going on in the world. We are getting closer and closer and closer to war, big wars, World War III. It may end up being some kind of nuclear war, and it just seems like that the elites of the world want this war. They want a nuclear war, and they want to see a lot of people dead on the earth because they believe there's too many people on the earth. And so I do want to talk about that a little bit. I think that the Bible has a lot to say about wars and rumors of wars. As Jesus told us, we would have wars and rumors of wars all the way to the end, and which is a very interesting thing. But I do want to start with a passage of scripture out of Daniel 10. And I think that, when the scriptures talk about Iran is going to attack Israel, the Bible teaches that, especially in the Gog-Magog prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. We had for the first time an attack from Iran, from Persia itself, on Israel. And that was big. I think that's a harbinger of things to come, because there's been a proxy war going on between Iran and Israel since 1979, and I have a lot of thoughts about that, that I do want to bring up. I think that think about this in terms of the way Satan works. So let's look at Daniel 10, and there's a very interesting passage of scripture here, and it's interesting because God brings up what's going on in the invisible world in Daniel chapter 10. And we don't have a lot of places in the Bible where God gives us a glimpse into what's going on supernaturally in the invisible world with Satan, with his fallen angels. And, obviously there are places in the Bible that talk about it. And this is one of those interesting places. So kind of like Job, we get this picture of what's going on in the heavenly council. Here's God, Satan comes up there, and Satan can't do anything to Job without the Lord's permission or without the Lord bringing these things about. And so let's look at Daniel 10, and we have this very interesting situation where Daniel was praying, and I'm going to start in verse 1, and my goal is to get down to verse 10, 11, 12, and there that you can see this kind of supernatural picture. And I believe that supernatural picture has something to do with what happened in Iran, in Persia, in 1979, and what happened just 2 weeks ago when Iran attacked Israel on Sabbath. Obviously, it's just very, very corrupt and evil thing that happened. So it says in chapter 10, verse 1, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belshazzar. And the message was true and one of great conflict, but he understood the message, and he had an understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. I did not eat any food, tasty food, nor did I eat meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all until the entire 3 weeks were completed. On the 24th day of the first month, while I was by the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris River, okay? So you have the Tigris and you have the Euphrates. And so he's at the Tigris River, and he says, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face had the appearance of lightning, his eyes were like flaming torches, his arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze, and the sound of his words were like the sound of a tumult. Now I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, while the men who were with me did not see the vision. Nevertheless, a great dread fell on them, and they ran away to hide themselves. So I was left alone. I saw this great vision, yet no strength was left in me, for my natural color turned to a death pallor, and I retained no strength. But I heard the sound of his words, and as soon as I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a deep sleep, and my face, I put my face to the ground. Then behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I'm about to tell you. Stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up, trembling. He said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this, and on humbling yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I've come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. And so there's a very interesting passage here that you get a picture of what was happening into the unseen world. And here an angel came with the message, but he was being resisted by this demon prince. This is a satanic fallen angel, very powerful, and he was the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And it's very interesting in Hebrew. It talks about this word here, Sar, meaning prince of Persia, and it can be a leader or a ruler or a chief. And so this was a demon prince or a chief prince under Satan, who was dispatched by God, by Satan, to stop what was happening, what God was doing. So he did not want this. And interesting, it says of Persia. Now I bring this up because when this demon prince came to stop the angel from coming from God to give the message, you have Michael the archangel, who steps in to fight and make this thing right. Now, Michael the archangel is the angel that God promises is the one who's going to protect Israel in the last days. And he is going to be fighting for Israel. Now, what makes it very interesting to me is the timing of all of the things that I see in the scriptures and on the earth. And one of the timing things is 30 years. I do want to talk about transitions, and I want to talk about how the Bible transitions itself from scene to scene. But when it does, that there's always this satanic battle going on and fighting to stop things. So let me just take a moment to talk about just briefly history here. In 1947, when the UN in November of 47 voted that they would divide the land of Israel and they would give the Jews a state of their own, there was obvious a very big uprising among Arab countries. They walked out of the UN meeting. They said, never, this is never going to happen. And they went and they prepared for war. Now, think about this, guys, how Satan works, because Satan could see that God was moving Jews to go back to the land since the 1800s. 1896, the Zionist movement, the World Zionist Congress, that there was this desire among evangelical Christians and among Jews now that Jews would go back to their land and settle in their land. That's huge. And biblically, we know that that's going to kick off the last part of Bible prophecy to the last days. So what does Satan do? He sees that as God was given the victory to Britain and America in World War One. America came in very late, but the British conquered Jerusalem. This was a tragedy for the Ottoman Empire, Muslim Empire. And when they got Jerusalem, the British evangelicals got together, and Lord Balfour wrote the Balfour Declaration, which wanted to establish the state of Israel. And the map that he put together was from the scriptures themselves. So the map went from basically the Nile to the Euphrates River. It was huge territory that they wanted to give the Jews. Now, Satan can see that, so he's going to respond. And this satanic, demonic nature that he puts forward is murder the Jews. And that has been going on, guys, since, hey, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? I mean, when Jacob has his 12 sons and then they go to Egypt, what's Pharaoh do? This demonic nature hit Pharaoh, so he's trying to murder all the baby boys in Exodus chapter 1. And this is the demonic nature of this demon prince and what he is pushing. And now this demon prince is still alive. Like, look, this demon prince is still there. And interestingly enough, just kind of a sidelight here, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, one day when he was the president of Iran, let's say go all the way back to 2009, 2008, I remember him coming to the UN, and there was an article in I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, maybe it had been another magazine, but he wanted the jinn, the angels or demons in Iran to contact the demons in America about how they can destroy America. It's a bizarre article. And so this invisible, supernatural, angelic world still exists. There's still battles. We don't know what's going on there. God has not privied us to get that insider military intelligence briefing from him. We don't have it, but Daniel did get it. He did get this military, intelligence briefing from God. He let him know that there was this battle going on for 21 days. Michael came to release, this angel so that he could go and talk to Daniel. Now, let me just talk about this for a second, because I think this is very important, and it's very important for us to understand this, okay? When was this happening? Let's go back up to verse 1, and let's paint the picture for you. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel. 3rd year. Think about this. How important is the number 3? Well, what was happening? When Cyrus came to power and he beat Babylon, in Ezra chapter 1 and Isaiah 45, God names Cyrus before he's even born. And this man makes a proclamation that the Jews can go back to their land and rebuild their temple. Do you think Satan wants that to happen? No way. So it's about this time, about the 3rd year, that you see the Jews are trickling back to the land. Not many of them went. You can go in the book of Ezra and begin to read this. And this took some time for them to get back. And the books of Haggai and Zechariah talk about this, that there was this delay in building the temple. And Haggai is very clear about this. They started building their own homes, and they get everything back, and they're not finishing the temple. And so the prophets Zechariah and Haggai are saying, hey, let's get this done. And God is telling you, look, you're going to plant food, you're not going to get a whole lot. Everything you do, I'm going to curse it because you're not building my house. And Haggai is very clear. Once they begin to build the house of the Lord, and this is timing up here, right? What's going on? This demon prince, they're angry. And they are raising up people in the land of Israel to stop them from building the temple. Well, what do you think is happening today? It's the exact same thing. This demonic force is pushing war, pushing to destroy the Jews, exactly as the Bible says would happen, right? And so behind the scenes in the spiritual world, we see the same thing happening here in Daniel that we see happening today. We're not privy to what happened in Tehran, but one of those people, I think, there's more than one, but many of them, under the inspiration of Satan, decided to launch all of these missiles at Israel. But it's worse than that. Let's look at this pattern. Okay, first, the pattern that God gives us in the Bible. At every scene, there's a transition. So scene 1 is Abraham to David. David is king. He's in Hebron. The transition now is that he would capture the Jebusite city, the city of Zion, which comes Jerusalem as the old city of David, right? And it's in that city that God forces David to put the Ark of the Covenant at Ornan, the Jebusites, and on his territory, which is the threshing floor, which is a flat threshing floor. And because it's flat, there's no way in God's green earth that threshing floor was up on the Temple Mount, because all of that was built up by Herod. And there's a big, huge rock, and it goes up like this. You can't put a threshing floor, you can't put a temple there. And so you see all of the evidence today, all of the evidence that these archaeologists have been doing work on since the 1950s, when Israel became a nation in 1948. Everything they find for evidence of the temple is south of the temple wall. So when David becomes king and he gets Jerusalem, it goes from the tabernacle to the temple, but God told David, you're not allowed to build a temple. Solomon would build the temple. So they go from tabernacle to temple, right? Now fast forward. From David to the Babylon captivity is 14 generations. And what happened there? God leaves the temple, and the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. And so one of the archaeologists that I followed, she died in 2021. I followed a lot of her work. Fascinating stuff. This woman, her daddy, her granddaddy, Benjamin Mazar, is one of the most famous archaeologists in Israel. And he was doing all of this work, which we call the Ophel. Okay, so think about it. Here's the city of David. And then the city of David was filled in, the northern part was filled in, partially the Milo, and that became the Ophel. And the Ophel is south of the temple walls. Let me bring up a picture for you, okay, so that you can see this. I want you to see this, okay? So let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger, okay? Okay, so here, right here this is what they call the Temple Mount, okay? So here you could stand up. I was standing up here in 2014, and I asked our guide, I said, well, where do you think the temple is up there? And he gave me like 3 spots. And this is kind of the tradition of the things that they say. And I said, well, where's the Gihon Springs? Because I know my Bible. I know that the temple was built by the Gihon Springs. So I was thinking, I've never been there before. not paying attention to my Bible maps. I'm thinking the Gihon Springs is up here because this is where the temple would get the water. He goes, no, turn around and look down here. It's down here. Okay, so this is where the Gihon Springs is. And we know from history, Josephus, Aristeas, all of these historians talk about that the temple had a running source of water in it from the Gihon. That water is not going all the way up there, guys. And so what happened is that Benjamin Czar, he got down the layers that he went down to, okay, did not go down to the time of the Babylonians. That's what happened to his granddaughter. Elat Mazar, right here, there's some rooms right here, and there's a wall that comes across that was built by Solomon, okay, and think about this. He built this big, huge wall. It's talked about even in the book of Nehemiah. Well, you wouldn't build that wall to protect the city of David if the temple was all the way up there. That would be nuts. But what did they find here? They found Hezekiah's signet ring. They found Isaiah's signet ring. They found two guys in the book of Jeremiah's signet ring. She eventually went down here and found David's palace. And so the just unbelievable finds, but everything is pointing down here for where the temple is. And so I don't think, eventually, I don't believe they're going to build the temple up there. Now, I know there's huge controversy with this, guys, but think about what is happening on the earth today, okay? What is happening is everything is stacked against Israel to rebuild that temple. Everything. Satan doesn't want it. He hates it. And eventually, when it happens, he wants to pervert that thing. And we know that that's what's going to happen with the Antichrist. But God wants that temple rebuilt. He prophesied that it would happen, and he wants it to be his temple. Why? And here's the reason why. Because he's going to use it as a way of leading Jews to himself in the tribulation period. And this Satan does not want. He knows that Elijah is coming with Moses. I think it's Moses. And they're going to preach. And we know the prophecy of Malachi says that there's going to be a great revival and Jews are going to come back to the Lord. And these are things Satan hates. He does not want this to happen. Okay? And so what's very interesting, I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but as you go down this road right here, okay, our bus was parked right here, and you go down this road right here, right in here, okay, this parking lot was excavated. And underneath this parking lot, right in here, what did they find? They found what they call the parbar. The parbar is the Hebrew for the apartments on the west side of the temple, meaning the temple was built, guys, right in here. And this is what many of those archaeologists found. They found a place where they think that the temple was down there, but they can't say much about it. Because the tradition is that it's all the way up here. Okay, you go over to the Western Wall. This is the Western Wall. They believe that this is where, these walls are still standing because it's the retaining walls for the temple and all of that kind of thing. So this is really, really controversial kind of stuff, but no controversy for God. God knows what he's doing. And here is the transitions. Okay, let me go ahead and come back to me. And let me just talk about these transitions. So, first transition, Solomon builds the temple. And then you fast forward from there, and you see from David to the Babylonian captivity, God is disciplining his people. And they are not believing in him, they're not trusting in him, they're not walking with him, they pervert everything. And God promises in the book of Jeremiah that he's going to take the temple down, right? So he promised in several prophets. And they were going to be in captivity for 70 years. That 70 years was a transition period. And when they come out of it, what we have is what we have in the book of Daniel. We have a book of Daniel, and the 70 years is up, and in chapter 9, Daniel is praying about it, and wow, we can go back. Chapter 10, it's the third year, and now here he's praying, and then boom, right? There's a battle over this. And so this is a transition, and the transition is about the temple. Okay, let's fast forward again. and you go from the Babylonian captivity to Jesus. And we have another transition with the temple. Why? Because Jesus said that the temple was going to be torn down and nothing would be left. Nothing. No walls, no nothing. Okay? And that temple's coming down, but we are the temple. We become the temple. So you see, you had during the time of Moses, it became a theocracy. God came to the earth. Then the temple was built in Jerusalem. Jerusalem becomes the major city, the eternal capital city of Israel. It's the capital city of the world. It's where Messiah is going to come. Jesus is going to come and rule the whole world from that place, right? And Satan can't stand this. He knows the scriptures. He knows what Revelation says. He knows what Isaiah says. He knows what Daniel says. He knows that the promises and the prophecies of the scriptures are going to come true, okay? So that's why he's always standing against the nation of Israel, and he's always inspiring nation after nation after nation to destroy the nation of Israel. And this is how, guys, this is history. This is every 100 years you can go and study and see, boom, they want to destroy the nation of Israel. It's a very sad picture of what is happening, okay? And so when we come up on 1948 and 49, Israel becomes a nation. What happens? The Arab nations attack. There's no reason for Israel to win this war. It's unbelievable what happens. But they win the war in 1949. And fast forward 30 years, 3-0. Very important. And where do you get? You get to 1979. And the Bible predicts that Iran, Persia, would be a nation that attacks Israel. And it was 30 years. And I think 30 is a significant number in the Bible. And the reason is because it's the time frame for priests. So they enter service at the age 30. They retire 30 years later, I think it is. And you can see this. Jesus started his ministry at 30 years. So did John the Baptist, started his ministry at 30 years old. That's what happened with the priests. So it's significant in my mind, and it is really spiritually significant and very satanic what happened in 1979. The Carter administration they said some things that were just absolutely atrocious, that the Ayatollah Khamenei was a righteous and good man, a holy man, la, la, la. They hated the Shah. They betrayed the Shah to get him out of there. When that guy came to power, from that point on, they started yelling, death to America, death to Israel. And so that's when it started that you had someone on the earth like the Nazis that were dedicated to destruction of all Jews in the world. And so this is a very, very serious situation. You see this on college campuses today, being inspired, paid for by Iran and all her proxies and all the groups that hate the Jews, that they have come and they want to attack Israel, and they want to attack Jews all over our country right now at the college level. And so they're having these big, huge marches on college campuses, yelling death to Jews. As a matter of fact, at one of the major universities, the rabbis are telling the Jews, leave and don't go back. And there's one rabbi, he came from Israel, he's come to America, and he's traveling around America, and he's telling people, guys, we've seen this before. This is like the 1930s in Germany, in America. You have to leave. Spiritually leave. Spiritually understand that this nation has turned on the Jews, and they're moving towards killing the Jews. This is what's happening in these cities. And so we as Christians, and any hopefully good-hearted people in America will stand up and not let this happen and stop this. But when you don't even have police want to go on a campus and stop it, I mean, there's some demonic stuff going on when university presidents support the murder of the Jews, make excuses for it, and then the police don't do anything. And these Jews are in their rooms scared to death, thinking somebody's going to come in. They're marching outside talking about how they're going to kill you. And then you don't even get any help from the university, not the president, not anybody. And this is a really, really serious situation. So back to Daniel 10, I think this is a very interesting verse. I want to read it again and then go on because it says, the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. And so, who is Michael? Well, Michael is the one who's going to protect Israel. And I think that's the battle. That's what people don't understand. The scriptures say Israel is going to get her land. Well, everybody in the world is against them getting their land. You're not allowed to live here. You're not allowed to live in Judea. You're not allowed to live in Samaria. You're not allowed to live in the Gaza Strip. Although the prophet Zephaniah, the prophet Jeremiah, okay, these prophets step up and say, all of these prophets, Micah, Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, all of them say, you're going to get all of your land, and then the world will hate you. Zechariah chapter 12 talks about they're going to hate Jerusalem so much it's going to be like a millstone around their neck. And this is what we see, the nature of what the things that are going on. So he goes on to say, in this passage, verse 14, he says, now I've come to give you understanding of what will happen to your people in the last days. For the vision pertains to the days that are yet future. And this is what we're talking about, guys. We're talking about the future in the book of Daniel. And the book of Daniel is very clear that Israel is coming back to her land like the other prophets speak about. And so that's the conflict that you see today. But the conflict has to do with the rebuilding of the temple. And so I think it's an amazing thing that this temple is going to be rebuilt. And when they rebuild this temple, although there's going to be wars all over the world, Israel will be protected. That temple will be protected, at least for the first 3.5 years. And then, that's only then will Antichrist be allowed to go into that temple. And that's only after Elijah and Moses finished their witness at the midpoint of the tribulation period. And God takes them home in this miraculous kind of way. And so think about it, guys. We're almost to that transition time. You have the red heifers, and people are trying to stop that. You have Passover right now. We're in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And these are biblical times, biblical seasons that God says these things are going to happen. So let me kind of step back now and bring in this idea of a nuclear war. Really interesting thing that during the time that the whole world was at war, World War II, and the Nazis were trying to wipe out the Jews in Poland, in Ukraine, in Hungary, in Germany, in France, all these nations where there was Jews, they took them, sent them to concentration camps to kill them, killed them in the streets, killed them in the forests. It's just a horrible, horrible thing that the Nazis were trying to develop, the nuke, right? Couldn't do it. But it was some Jewish guys who come to America who actually pulled off being able to build nuclear weapons, which we used on Japan to end World War II. All right. Israel becomes a nation, 1948, and it was at this time that Russia very clearly, they need to get nukes. Soviet Union needs to get nukes. They need to catch up to America. And there was a fear in the world. There was a fear of nuclear bombs because they're so powerful, right? And thermonuclear bombs are way more powerful than what was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So in 1942, in January of 1942, there was a Wannsee Conference. And that conference was when Hitler said, we need to develop the final solution to wipe out Jews. Well, keep that in the back of your mind here for a second, because in 1960, in December of 1960, when there was 3 billion people on the earth, the United States called for a conference. And in that conference, they put together a thermonuclear war strategy to go to war using nukes that would kill, at that time, they believed that if they initiated this plan, they would kill 600 million people fighting the Soviet Union. And it was called SIOP, Single Integrated Operational Plan for General Nuclear War. And this meeting was at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, a very important base for the United States in terms of our nuclear triad and the way we would ever go about conducting a nuclear war. And so here these guys were all there. All of the Joint Chiefs were there, the generals, and very important people from the State Department, different places. But I just want to talk about two guys that were there. One, his name was John Rubel. He was a director of Defense Research and Engineering, the deputy director of the U.S. for that. And John Rubel was a part of putting together these plans. And the other person that I want to mention is the Marine Commandant, General David Shoup. And you think about this, back in 1960, that's when I was born. There was only 3 billion people. Today they say there's 8 billion. 3 billion people, if you kill 600 million, that's 1/5 of the population of the world. Now, I read the book of Revelation. I'm studying the book of Revelation with a bunch of guys right now. When the trumpet judgments go off, remember, God does things in thirds. Like a third of the trees are going to burn up, right? The third of the grass, third of this, a third of the people are going to be killed. And I thought with the fire, this is one of the things that happens when you have a nuclear bomb go off. Oh, fire, it just consumes everything and burns people to death and consumes them. And that's what fire does. And I'm not saying that that's going to be nuclear bombs, but I think that nukes are going to fly here before Antichrist rises. And so in doing this white paper, writing out their plans and putting them into effect, like how they're going to go about dropping, and let me just look at the numbers here. 40 megaton of nukes on Moscow. That's their goal. That they came out of this. Okay, and you can get this open source material now. You can see some of the stuff from that. Some of it's still classified, but there was a book written by Annie Jacobsen on nuclear war where she has interviewed all these guys. So the John Rubel guy, when he was in his 80s, so this is 2008, he felt really convicted. He felt very bad about what they had done. And he wrote this because he felt so much remorse for putting together a plan like Hitler did in 1942, wiping these people off the face of the earth, the Russians. Like, wow. He said he called it the Heart of Darkness plan, a plan for mass extermination where we would drop 40 megatons of nukes on one city, Moscow. Those 40 megatons would be 30 times more powerful than all of the bombs dropped in World War II put together on one city. You talk about, you got to be sicko in your head to think about killing people like that. Right? And so he felt really, really bad. And he tells the story that at the end of all of their planning, it put this all together, that they started congratulating each other for doing a good job. So all these guys are congratulating each other for doing a good job, but there was one man who objected. One man would not say one thing, and he would not say you did a good job. As a matter of fact, he said something opposite. This is what he said. This was the Marine Commandant. General Shoup said, Any plan that murders 300 million Chinese. And by the way, of the 600 million that we're going to kill, because of the fallout and stuff that would happen over the border from Russia into China, they believe 300 million Chinese would die. They weren't even at war with them. So Shoup said, any plan that murders 300 million Chinese who are not even in the fight or at war with us, that's not a good plan. It's not the American way. This is like the Nazis at Wannsee. Come on. But I love that Marine Commandant. He's telling the truth. At least he had some moral guts to stand up and say, this is absolutely ridiculous. Well, why am I bringing this all up? It seems like our elites in the world are pushing for nuclear war. We're more, I can't tell you the amount of articles I've read that we're on the brink, closer and closer and closer to nuclear war. And knowing how nuclear war can start, let me just give you a scenario. Andy Jacobson talked about this scenario. Let's just say that the North Koreans all of a sudden launch intercontinental ballistic missile at the United States. Gets through our air defenses because we don't have great air defenses in the United States, especially to stop a intercontinental ballistic missile, which as fast as those things go, and that thing hits the Pentagon, automatically the United States is going to be into a response. And let's just say from one of their subs, they launch a missile and it hits California, one of our nuclear power plants in California. This is the scenario she puts together. This is kind of the white paper. We are automatically, by law, we are automatically by the same rules. Now, it's called differently, but it's the same thing. When we get hit, you've lost some deterrence. You have to re-get the deterrence. And the way you get to re-energize the deterrence is you launch your missiles at North Korea. There's a problem. If you launch your missiles, and in her scenario, we launch almost 100 missiles with nukes to decapitate North Korea. Well, the Russians see all of the launches, and those missiles have to go over the North Pole and go over part of Russia to hit North Korea. So they misinterpret it and they launch their missiles at us. You can see this can be a terrible, terrible thing. Why am I bringing this up? Because Poland wants missiles. They want nukes on their land. This is what Russia has said since the 1990s. Do not bring nukes into the former Warsaw Pact nations. When they turned to the West and wanted to join NATO, Russia said, that's a line. If you cross it, we'll go to war. And that's why Putin has talked about going to nuclear war with the United States and with the West and with NATO for the last 20 years. And he has said it over and over again. I mean, there is a time at which these crazy people, they're literally, I believe they're crazy, and I believe they're demonically inspired people that are in Washington, D.C., in Moscow, and all of these places, that this is going to cause the type of evil, type of war that will bring on the Antichrist. And what happens when the Antichrist comes? He doesn't come as what people say, all of this peacemaker, right? The first picture we get of Antichrist in the book of Revelation is he comes riding on a horse conquering. Okay? So he is going to make peace by force people to do otherwise what they would want to do. And when they sign this peace treaty to put all of these things down, he is not going to rule in any other way but by force, by anger, by wickedness, by lies, by deception. He's a murderer, and he follows the father of murders and the father of lies. And so there's going to be a lot of death that comes out of this. And so I see this same development here. You see this with the rise of the weapons of mass destruction, whether they're biological, chemical, or nuclear. And we have many forms of nukes that can be used. You have nations now that have nukes they are not sane people. Kim Jong Un in North Korea is not sane. Okay? And here's the other reason why. It's not only Putin threatening nuclear war, but it is Iran threatening to nuke Israel. And they are very close to getting a nuke. This is going to cause a war, guys. A war which I think is going to end up eventually in the Gog Magog prophecy. So that's a little story about 1960. This is when this PSYOP plan was put together. And all they've done is taken that plan and re-energized it and redid it. They call it something else today. But by and large, it's the same thing. We have a nuclear triad. We have our satellite systems. If they see a launch of an ICBM coming and they see it's coming toward the United States, they are obligated to, boom, hit them with nukes. And so we're right at the cusp of this. Well, spiritually, we're right at the cusp of rebuilding the temple. We're right at the cusp of having everything ready. Red heifers, they have them ready. Have they sacrificed one? I don't know. I think they have. I think they have. And so what's going to happen over the next few weeks is Israel is going to win the war inside of her own territory. In the Gaza Strip, in Rafah, they are constantly fighting in Lebanon right now. It doesn't go report it. It's not reported. But let me bring up what the world is talking about. And so let me just show you this headline here. And this is a headline, basically came out Tuesday, April 23rd, which was yesterday. So look at this headline. Russia vows to ramp up attacks on Western weapons in Ukraine. Okay, and so they are pushing this fight with the West. And what's really interesting is that at one point, Sergei Lavrov said that we will use nukes if we keep getting pushed. All right, look at this next article right here. Let me share this with you real quick. Turkish President Erdogan, Israel is perpetrating genocide in Gaza and the West Bank. It surpassed Hitler long ago. Hamas is not a terrorist group. All right, well, this is what's being said on our college campuses. This is what's being said in the Congress by certain congressmen and in the Senate by certain senators. They are trying to protect Hamas. Joe Biden is trying to protect Hamas. He doesn't want them to go into Rafah, and he doesn't want them to stop Hamas. He wants Hamas to be a viable organization. But yet, here we have Erdogan saying, and this is a lie straight from the pit of hell. I don't know how anybody who is not inspired by devils and demons can say what Erdogan is saying. To say that, to even compare the nation of Israel and what Netanyahu is doing and what the IDF is doing to what Hitler did is really, they don't know history. It's just a lie. It's just one big deception, one big lie, lie after lie after lie. To see this guy, watching his speech and looking at the captions and things that he's saying, it is obvious Erdogan wants, and he has always stated that he wants this, he wants Israel destroyed. He wants them gone from the face of the earth. He called for 1 million-man army to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. That's pretty consistent with what Iran says. That's what the current Ayatollah Khamenei wrote a book about it. Wrote a book on how they would wipe out all the Jews in the world. Same thing. It's interesting that they make the accusation of Israel for doing genocide when they're the ones who want to do genocide. And that's what Satan always does. He's always throwing hatred and wickedness and evil out there, okay? And so I want to go back to 2009 because I'm thinking about, well, if it was 30 years from 49, they won the war, to 79 when Iran rose to play her part in biblical prophecy. Well, 30 years later was 2009. What happened in 2009? I think is very significant. Look at this article from 2009. And when I saw this article, I thought, wow, I lived through this, okay? Israel mutes its rhetoric against Iran as talks loom. All right? You probably can't read that very well. Let me go ahead and just read it to you. Israel has warned for years that it might carry out military action to prevent Iran from building an atomic bomb. That was in 2009, guys. Okay? But as the United States and other powers prepare to confront Iran in talks this week, the message from Jerusalem is more restrained. Israeli leaders say they're willing to wait for President Obama to play out his strategy of negotiating with Iran. Okay, this was one of the biggest deceptions from Satan. Oh my gosh. Obama trying to convince the world he was for peace when he wasn't for peace. What he was for is giving Iran $150 billion to help them prepare their armed forces, the IRGC, to prepare the nukes, to prepare the missiles, to prepare all the money that they got from him, and now that they get from Biden, is all to prepare for the Gog-Magog prophecy. All of it. And so you go from 2009 to today, right? What is that? 15 years. And in that 15 years, we saw the beginnings of the foundations of all of these prophecies coming together at one time. At one time. And so let me just read from Zechariah and Zechariah 12, and I think I'll stop with there because I think this is the demonic forces that we see in the world today of these nations that they have come, that are coming against Israel, and they hate Jerusalem. They do not want Jerusalem in the hands of the Jews. International law says Jerusalem is an independent city. It's not Jewish. It's an international city. No one can claim it except Palestinians, obviously. That's what they're going to say at the UN. The UN is just one big anti-Semitic hate on Israel organization. That's all they are. That's all they've become. That's what they're obsessed at. They're just obsessed. The United States government, Joe Biden, just sanctioned the IDF, Israel Defense Force. I mean, you got to be kidding me. And so what does Zechariah say? It says in chapter 12, the burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretches out the heavens, who lays the foundation of the earth, and he forms the spirit of man within him. Behold, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes railing to all of the peoples around. And when the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. And you realize that this is coming, this one day. Revelation talk about these other, that one day, and Armageddon's coming, and they're going to fight. And then he goes on to say, it will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples, and everyone who lifts it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. All the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. It's Armageddon. So we know right now this book, this city is just choking the nations out. He can't stand it. That Israel, the Knesset, is in Jerusalem. That all of this archaeology is finding proof after proof in the city of David, finding David's palace, finding all of these signet rings, finding the signet ring of Nathan Melech in the Parbar. I mean, this is unbelievable. And yet people don't see it. They don't believe. They don't have any spiritual eyes, so they don't see the truth. And so if you are come upon this video some point and you're watching it and you sense that, yeah, God really is in control of the future and the history, and maybe the Holy Spirit will speak to you and you can give your life to Christ. And so let me just share one verse with you. It says the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. And if you sense God drawing you, just turn your heart over to Him. Put your faith in Him and ask Him to save you, because soon and very soon the trumpets are going to sound. And the dead in Christ will rise first, and we who are alive will be caught up together with Him in the air. And when that happens, the harpazo, when that happens, when we, the church, leave, all these Christians gone from the earth, that's when Satan will begin his work, and God will begin His work to bring in the tribulation period. And the tribulation period is going to be an unbelievable time when we're in heaven watching it, because we'll be like John watching everything happen. But we will see God save people like, wow, it's going to be unbelievable how He saves Israel, and thus all Israel will be saved. I cannot wait to see that day. Can't wait. So, guys, thanks for being on today. Thanks for watching, and I pray that God will use this in your hearts and souls just to pray about today. And while we have time, let's occupy till He comes. Let's share the good news. Let's live for the Lord and walk with Him in power and strength. Okay? Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you. Bye bye.